Hello class, this is Mr. DeVoe-Peterson and this is chapter 3, and we're talking about the infrastructure and the many devices that you'll need for a wireless network. And I try to highlight them down here in green on my ebook, the wireless access points, the bridges, controllers, and then you have those that are off-site, the cloud managed that are in the cloud. And depending on how big the wireless deployment is, that'll really tell you which you need, right? If it's your home, you'll have kind of an all-in-one autonomous unit down here. If it's a little larger, like a small office with 3 or 4 access points, you'll do probably controller managed. You might do cloud. Cloud's mainly for the bigger deployments, large enterprise type systems. Just a definition here. If you're connected to an access point, that means you're connected to a wired network, and that's infrastructure mode. And I'm gonna jump through here with the expectation that you're going to read this. Autonomous. Okay, self-contained units. What you might buy at Costco or Best Buy or some store, Office Depot. I don't want to leave anybody out. Staples. There's others. And they're consumer grade. And they're $100 or less, and those are access points. Or maybe they come from your internet service provider. Maybe Xfinity or what's the other one? AT&T. Right? You'll have an access point built into its own router, right? Consumer grade. And it has, the standard things, your network address translation, your DHCP server that delves out IP addresses to the clients, routing, DNS service. Usually you can't change that. You would, I'm Comcast, so it would be, it would be what they give me. I can't change it to Google, and firewall. So they are handy, right? And usually you've got 4 ports in the back, Ethernet ports, and 1 that goes to the modem itself. And then you have the next category up in, I guess, capacity, you might say, is the small office, home office, Soho grade we call. And typically they have, and this is not chisels and stone, but removable antennas, but then so do the autonomous ones. You can change the transmission power, but then you can do that with the cheap ones too. I would say the big one here is the security options and bridge modes and things like that, and configuration settings. And this is an example of one here where there's just one LAN port. It's kind of giving you a clue then. It's going to be connected to a router at some point. It's not an all-in-one unit, is it? All right, let's see. What else? Let's come down here. More security. VPN pass-through. Then some of the consumer grades have that too now. So it's amazing how this technology is flowing to the cheaper units. Enterprise. Here's the big one, the big enchilada. You can adjust with more fidelity the transmission power, because you really don't want that signal going outside the boundaries of the building itself, right? So you may reduce the power for that reason. More security. Of course, interoperability works for all of them. But here's the big one, I think. If you were to ask me what's the one big difference for enterprise, is that wireless intrusion protection systems. Some of the consumer grades are offering that as kind of a cloud service, but that's kind of a big thing for enterprise. It needs a little bit more horsepower and memory in the unit to do that type of analysis of the data packets, right? So WIPS, Wireless Intrusion Protection System, that's a big one. And radio server authentication by a user. All right, those are advanced features. Let's see, I think I didn't skip far enough here. Where is my enterprise? Way down here. Here we go. Okay, so those are some advanced features for enterprise type units. Yeah, most of it's going to be a GUI interface. Controller managed. Usually there's hardware for controllers that manage all of these access points at the enterprise level, because they need to kind of work together in their zones. And there's other capabilities, and did I skip it? Removable antennas, Wi-Fi. A lot of different and cost. Soho grade, industrial environment ratings. Yeah, some of them are rated for outside too. So, all right, let me jump down here. Wireless intrusion protection, that's a biggie. Mesh networking, well, you can do that on self-contained now. It's not the big dividing factor between your just single one autonomous and enterprise like it used to be, maybe a few years before the book was published. Here's a cloud managed. Well, here's an indoor access point. This is an example one for you, Blue Socket. I am not familiar with that brand, but managed to the cloud, and large deployments need that. What else? VPN capabilities. That's kind of a nice technology, a little extra security, maybe for home office to reach for the corporate network. Mesh technology, I guess you're familiar with that probably, because even the consumer grade ones are offering that in large houses that maybe have upstairs and downstairs. Bridge mode, even the consumer grades are doing that, but this is an example of a point-to-point bridge mode setup where you don't want to trench on the road. Repeaters, they're not as efficient as the multiple access points, because you're going to get a degradation in the signal strength as you regenerate that signal and repeat it to the client. What else? This is probably the big thing. Advanced security features. This has to do with the controllers, right? Be it an in-house controller or cloud managed. That the web portals, the radius capability for you having a user account password and a setting, be able to log on, not just knowing the password, but you're known to the system, right? So there's extra security in that. But these are big. Predictive modeling, site survey tools, and radio frequency spectrum analysis, where you can see what other signals are roaming around that cause interference for the Wi-Fi signal, where the signal is bouncing off, maybe metal or glass or filing cabinets. That helps you with that, and it helps you with the placement of those access points. And then intrusion protection. Those are big for enterprise. Virtual area networks. The concept with this, you might have had it if you had the CIT-57 networking class, where you take a layer 2 network, a segment, and you segment the segment and the segment with a virtual definition with user properties and things like that. That's a virtual local area network. Maybe you have two groups of, here's an example, in a large installation, you have two groups or departments in the same floor, but that floor has its own switch, and it controls all the devices on that floor. But part of them are maybe personnel and part of them are sales, and they really don't get access to each other's systems, right? Personnel is read-write to the files. Sales would be read-only, right? So how do you separate that large segment out? You use a virtual local area network to do that, and we might get into that a little bit more. Power over Ethernet is a big concept. That means that for those access points and repeaters and devices, I don't need an outlet. The power comes from the data cable, and there's a couple examples of data cable. We talked about Radius again. It's a technology for authenticating users, and I've noticed that some of the consumer grade routers and controllers and access points are starting to put in that capability, but more limited in scope than enterprise. We talked about predictive modeling, or where the placement of the access points, firewalls, of course. And there's a little repetition in this chapter. We're talking about intrusion protection systems again. Let's see, power over Ethernet. A couple of different designs for that. The initial one is 802.3AF. And then a more recent one is 802.3AT. The difference mainly being, I think we'll get to that in a second, right here, that the initial power was 15.4 watts. With the new standard PoE Plus, it is 34.2 watts. So it depends on the technology, which one you're going to use. And there's a couple different ways of doing it. One is in the smart switch itself, which is an endpoint injector, and one would be put in route along the route. Should it go past the distance of the Cat6 cable, go past the limits of that signal on the cabling, you could put a mid-span injector in that case in there. There's 100 meters for the distance for Wi-Fi. Here's an example of a single port injector. And we saw the switch. Hold on, we saw the switch up here. Let me go back to it. And here we go. This is an example of a switch. And this is only really a 4-point for the users and 1 to get to the network. A lot of the PoE switches have at least 8, and half of them are powered, half of the ports are powered and half are not, because you don't need a power switch for everything. So some things are near electrical, so you don't need to have it. Okay, where am I? Okay, some of the capabilities. Firewalls are standard. Intrusion Protection system, we talked about that. Power over Ethernet. Okay, this is where I left off. We talked about the standard of the initial PoE, the .3AF of 15 watts, and then the newer one, PoE Plus, is 34 watts. And the injectors and the distance for the spans. What else? The book goes into USB, because some of the laptops may not have the newest network cards inside them, right? So you may have to add an external USB Wi-Fi card for that laptop. So they go through the history of USB 1 through USB 3, and I think it even goes above that now. And an example of the hardware equipment and you installing it with device drivers and what these cards look like inside computers. If you've opened them up, you know what the PCI boards look like. And of course, for the smaller devices, I'm going to jump past some of this stuff. Here's a smaller board, right? This is a mini PCI with a smaller, cases get smaller, you need to make the devices smaller. Here's smaller yet, a mini PCIe adapter. And what else? Exercises, wireless work groups. I don't see this too much, but it could be you have a need to connect these workgroup computers all to the infrastructure of the network, and you set up a computer to act as that bridge to the access point for all of these systems. That's all it is. And it really depends on the environment of the computers and how they're strung. Just know that that exists. You don't know, you don't need to be the one to make that decision at this point in your careers, but no, that's just a solution. Maybe they're just getting these PCs access to an access point so they can get to a centralized printer, or for an example, right? What else? Genius devices, I've used that. Client drivers, this talks about software drivers, software programs to help the operating system to know that hardware exists. And utility programs, Windows is getting smarter, so less and less of this is needed. And speaking of Windows getting smarter, this is Windows 10 with its own wireless LAN controller configuration. And then the summary. So yes, we talk about the devices in this chapter. We talked about those broad categories, right? Of you have your autonomous access points. You have the Soho access points for a little bigger type office situation, 3 or 4. And then you have enterprise with much more capabilities, with cloud being a big part of that, right? And that is it. So don't let all these terms hang you up. Go through the chapter and just know that there are tools that are used when we're designing a wireless network. They're all pieces and part of the solution to make that wireless network robust and work well. And I think that's it. These are exam considerations where they talk about where, if you were to take the test, what kind of things are important. And here's IEEE.3, so you know that has to do with those PoE devices, right? And PoE Plus. What else? And some test questions to kind of get yourself ready. I think that's it. Read the chapter 3. I think you'll like it. Don't let it scare you, and ask me questions if you have them. All right, good luck.